Whispers rise in a person's life long before storms ever appear. And most people never notice them. They walk past the soft pull in the heart, the quiet warning in the mind, the sacred nudge in the spirit. They treat these moments as coincidence until they realize they were signals they were never meant to ignore. I am Shi Heng Yi, and today I want to take you into a deeper layer of awareness, one that many overlook. In this message, we explore a principle known across ancient traditions yet rarely understood: the law of spiritual reciprocity. When you honor the voice within, your path opens. When you turn away from it, your inner clarity dims. This isn't punishment. It is a natural law, like breath, like focus, like energy itself. In this video, you will learn why the softest guidance often carries the greatest power, why the nudge you feel is not random but rooted in the same wisdom monks trained to sense through years of discipline. You will hear about lesser-known insights, how ignoring these signals slowly weakens your spiritual sensitivity, and how responding to them strengthens courage, intuition, and divine alignment. You will also discover how ancient monks interpreted these hidden moments and why Jesus spoke of the heart that hears and the heart that refuses. Stay with me until the end, because the final teaching will show you a rare perspective, how your spiritual life transforms the moment you stop dismissing the subtle voice inside you. Welcome to Shaolin Soulfire. If you seek clarity, inner power, and a deeper connection with the sacred, join our community, subscribe, and walk this path with us. Sometimes the direction of a life changes not through force but through what the mind repeatedly chooses to see or chooses to avoid. In the Shaolin path, there's a teaching that guides every movement. Energy follows focus. Where the eyes rest, the body moves. Where the mind settles, the spirit flows. A monk understands this early, because every training session reveals it. When your attention drifts, even for a moment, your stance weakens, your balance trembles, and your breath loses its rhythm. But when you return your focus, your energy gathers again like water returning to its source. This principle lives far beyond the training hall. There were students who came to me with restless hearts. They wanted peace, but their focus stayed on worry. They wanted clarity, yet they fed distractions. And slowly, what mattered most in their lives became faint, not because it was unimportant, but because they turned away from it again and again. The inner life works the same way. When you turn your focus away from your breath, awareness dulls. When you turn your focus away from your conscience, sensitivity fades. And when you repeatedly turn away from God's gentle voice, those small inner nudges, those moments of knowing, you begin to lose the ability to hear them. Not because the divine stops speaking, but because your attention stops listening. A monk sharpens his senses by returning to the present again and again. In the quiet moments of training, he learns that focus shapes reality. He learns that even the faintest signal becomes strong when honored. And he learns that neglecting the inner voice is like turning away from the breath. Eventually, you forget how deeply life was trying to guide you all along. Where your focus rests, your spirit follows. There are moments in a person's life when something within stirs, quietly, almost imperceptibly. It does not announce itself with force. It arrives as a shift in the chest, a gentle pull toward honesty, a subtle discomfort when you are about to drift off your true path. This is the inner nudge, the soft whisper that exists, long before any chaos, long before any visible sign appears. Ancient teachers understood that the most important messages are rarely loud. A monk once said that the universe never shouts, only the mind does. The sacred, whether you call it conscience, spirit, or God's guidance, moves with a softness that requires discipline to perceive. To sense a nudge, you must slow the noise within. You must breathe with intention. You must meet life with awareness rather than reaction. In the old monasteries, students were trained to detect the smallest shifts in their bodies, a change in breath, a flicker of emotion, a tightening of the shoulders. This was not merely physical training, it was preparation to sense life's deeper messages. The belief was simple: if you can sense a single grain of sand beneath your foot, you can sense truth beneath the surface of your own thoughts. This spiritual sensitivity is a gift, but it is also fragile. When ignored repeatedly, the inner voice begins to fade. not as punishment, but as the natural consequence of neglect. Just as a blade loses its edge when left unused, the spirit becomes dull when its guidance is dismissed. A heaviness forms, not dramatic but gradual, like dust settling on a window until the light becomes difficult to see. Yet the nudge never disappears completely. It waits for the moment when you finally pause, breathe, and listen again. For in that moment of returning, clarity begins to rise, and the whisper becomes a guiding force once more. There is a place within the mind that most people rarely enter, a quiet opening between one thought and the next. It is subtle, like the pause between heartbeats or the stillness between each inhale and exhale. Yet this small, barely noticeable space holds immense power. It is here in this tiny gap that intuition rises. It is here the Holy Spirit speaks with gentleness and clarity. Mindfulness teaches that thoughts are like passing clouds. They appear, move across the sky of the mind and dissolve. But the sky itself, the open space behind them, remains untouched. Ancient practitioners trained themselves not to chase every cloud. They learned to rest in the sky. In that stillness, truths that were previously hidden became visible. There is an old teaching that says, noise reveals the world, silence reveals the soul. And this is why a constantly busy mind struggles to hear anything sacred. When thoughts race from one worry to another, when emotions pile on top of each other, when the inner world becomes crowded, there is no room left for a divine whisper to enter. It is like trying to hear a soft voice while standing beside a roaring waterfall. But when the mind is quiet, even for a moment, the whisper becomes unmistakable. Many monks learned this during hours of silent meditation, when one thought would end and the next had not yet arrived. In that moment of pure presence, they felt something beyond themselves, a direction, a knowing, a warmth, a truth. This was not imagination, it was the wisdom that emerges when inner chaos settles. Listening between thoughts is not about forcing silence. It is about allowing space. It is the practice of letting the noise soften, letting the breath settle, and letting awareness expand. And as the mind grows quieter, the sacred becomes clearer, until you realize it was speaking all along. You simply needed room inside to hear it. There comes a time in every spiritual journey when a person realizes that ignoring guidance carries a quiet cost. It does not arrive suddenly. It does not strike with force. It unfolds slowly, subtly, almost invisibly, until one day you notice that the clarity you once felt has dimmed, and the path ahead seems harder to navigate. Ancient traditions teach that divine guidance is like a flame. It glows steadily when you tend to it, when you listen, when you act with sincerity. But if you repeatedly turn away, the flame doesn't lash out, it simply grows smaller, not out of anger, but because every source of light weakens when it is no longer welcomed. A candle left untended eventually burns out, not suddenly, but gradually, just as inner clarity fades when the soul's signals are ignored. There are people who once felt deep direction in life, a sense of timing, a sense of knowing, a sense of being led. But over the years they pushed away those impressions, they dismissed their intuition, they ignored the gentle correction in their conscience, and without realizing it, they drifted into a life ruled by fear, impulse, or emotional storms. A monk once taught that when the inner compass is not honored, the outer world becomes louder. This means that when you stop listening to the guidance within, you begin reacting to everything around you. You start making choices from survival rather than wisdom, from tension rather than truth. The body tightens, the mind becomes noisy, and the heart loses its quiet confidence. Yet the consequence is never final. The inner flame can always be rekindled, but acknowledging the cost is essential. Divine guidance does not disappear out of anger, it simply steps back when ignored, waiting for the moment you choose to return, listen, and walk again with clarity. In the quiet of a training hall, a monk learns to sense the smallest shift in energy, a breath that deepens, a pulse that quickens, a movement that carries unseen weight. Years of practice teach that these subtle changes are never meaningless. They are messages, signals from the body and spirit, if one has learned to notice. Spiritual mastery unfolds in much the same way. The heart whispers before the mind shouts, a gentle tightening in the chest, a calm certainty that rises without reason, a thought that repeats itself quietly. All of these are signs pointing toward deeper truth. They are the subtle signals of conscience, urging attention, correction, or action long before the consequences of ignoring them appear. In ancient Shaolin wisdom, awareness was trained through repetition and stillness. Students would spend hours observing their own breath, their own movement, the subtle shifts of balance and energy. The lesson was clear: nothing small is insignificant. In the same way, the spiritual seeker cultivates sensitivity to the inner world, learning that the seemingly minor stirrings of conscience are often the most profound guides. There was a student who, in the middle of a difficult choice, felt only a slight unease in his chest. He ignored it at first, dismissing it as distraction. Days later, the situation had grown tangled and complicated, and the lesson became clear. The small signal had been an early warning. The mastery lies not in avoiding mistakes entirely, but in noticing these early signals before they become urgent. To train the heart to notice is to train the mind to pause. It is to create a space where intuition, spirit, and awareness converge. Every small sensation becomes a teacher. Every quiet thought a guide. The discipline of listening cultivates a steady mind, a balanced heart, and a life aligned with purpose. Over time, these subtle signals no longer go unnoticed. They become a map for living with wisdom and presence. There is a quiet test that each seeker faces, learning to distinguish the voices within. The mind speaks in many tones. Ego is sharp, demanding, urgent. Fear presses and agitates, stirring restlessness and tension. And then there is the voice of the divine, soft, steady, unwavering. It does not rush. It does not demand. It guides with calm persistence, like a river carving its path over centuries. Ancient masters observed this carefully. In the Shaolin halls, students were taught to notice the difference between impulse and awareness. A sudden urge might come with heat, tension, or haste. This is ego. A tight, anxious thought that pushes you toward avoidance is fear. But a gentle, repeated whisper, accompanied by a sense of peace, points to wisdom beyond the self. This is the voice that calls without forcing, teaches without punishment, and corrects without anger. There are countless stories of disciples who mistook urgency for truth. A decision made from fear led to confusion. A choice made from ego led to pride and disconnection. But when the same disciple learned to pause, to breathe, to observe the subtle qualities of each inner voice, discernment awakened. He began to recognize divine nudges, not by volume, but by the quiet steadiness behind them, a calm that remains even in the chaos of the mind. Training to distinguish these voices requires discipline. It is a form of inner martial art, observing without reaction, feeling without attachment, and listening without judgment. The more practiced one becomes, the easier it is to know when to follow, when to wait, and when to release. Spiritual maturity is not achieved through intensity or force, but through this patient, attentive awareness. Over time, the seeker learns that the subtle, gentle guidance of the sacred always surpasses the loud claims of ego or the pressure of fear. It is a steady hand that leads if only one chooses to notice. There is a moment that is often overlooked. A space so brief it almost seems invisible, yet it carries immense power. Before words are spoken, before actions are taken, before choices are made, there exists a pause, a sacred interval where the ordinary meets the divine. In that pause, the restless mind softens, the heart steadies, and clarity begins to rise. Shaolin monks call it the breath that decides the next action. In training halls, every movement is guided by this principle. A hand does not strike until the breath has settled. A foot does not step until awareness has measured the space. The pause is not hesitation, it is precision. It is the bridge between impulse and intention, between chaos and calm. In life beyond the training hall, the same truth applies. Every decision carries energy. Every reaction shapes reality. Yet most people move so quickly that the subtle signals, the gentle guidance of the spirit, are drowned in noise. The sacred pause teaches that by allowing even a single breath, even a moment of stillness, one opens the door for higher direction. There was a student who faced a choice that seemed urgent. The mind screamed for action. The heart whispered uncertainty. But in the pause, just a breath, just a stilling of thought, something shifted. A clarity appeared, subtle but undeniable, pointing toward the right path. That single moment prevented a misstep that would have caused unnecessary struggle. Mastery of the sacred pause is mastery of life itself. It is discipline applied not to the body alone, but to the mind and heart. It is awareness cultivated in every breath, every thought, every motion. In the stillness, the noise falls away, and the quiet voice that has always been present becomes unmistakable. In that pause, the spirit speaks, and the path forward is revealed with gentle certainty. There is a quiet power in repetition, in the rituals that shape the rhythm of life. Ancient masters understood this. They knew that discipline was not only about grand acts, but about the small daily practices that reconnect a person to what is sacred. A few minutes each day, devoted to stillness, prayer, breathwork, or gratitude, may seem insignificant. Yet over time, these moments accumulate, weaving a steady current of presence through the mind and heart. In the monasteries, students would rise before dawn, spending hours in silent observation of breath and movement. At first, it felt tedious, almost invisible. But gradually, awareness deepened. The subtle signals of the body and spirit became unmistakable. The mind learned to slow, the heart learned to notice, and what once went unseen began to emerge with clarity. Life beyond the walls follows the same principle. When daily practices are neglected, the connection to divine guidance becomes thin, like a river choked with sediment. But when practiced consistently, even briefly, the flow reopens. The heart begins to sense the nudges it once ignored. The mind becomes attentive to the soft whispers of intuition. Awareness is no longer a rare occurrence. It becomes a natural state. Stories from the past speak of seekers who, through simple daily commitment, transformed their lives. One who spent just 10 minutes each morning in silence found that over months, decisions became clearer, conflicts resolved more gracefully, and inner peace became a constant companion. The act itself was small, almost invisible, but the effect was profound. Consistency is the key. Spiritual presence does not arrive in grand gestures or sudden bursts. It returns quietly, step by step, moment by moment. Daily practice trains the heart to notice, the mind to listen, and the spirit to awaken. Over time, ignoring the inner voice becomes impossible, not through force, but through the gentle shaping of discipline and devotion. There is a truth that has echoed through generations of seekers. The path may be forgotten, but the guide is never absent. Even when the signs were overlooked, even when the whispers were dismissed, the voice of the sacred remains quiet, patient, and unwavering. It does not retreat out of anger, but waits, like the sun behind clouds, ready to shine the moment the heart turns back. Ancient teachings tell of wanderers who strayed far from their practice. Some were caught in fear, some in pride, and others in distraction. For a time, clarity seemed lost. But when they paused, humbled themselves, and opened their awareness, guidance returned with a clarity they had never known. The Holy Spirit, the subtle inner compass, responds not to perfection but to sincerity, the willingness to notice, to listen, and to follow. In Shaolin practice, there is a principle of return. A student may falter, misplace focus, or become restless. Yet every return to discipline, every breath taken with awareness, every mindful moment reconnects energy, focus, and intention. The same is true in the inner life. Turning back to what is sacred rekindles the channels that were once blocked. The signals that seemed faint grow unmistakable. The path, though momentarily blurred, comes into view again. There is a story of a seeker who ignored the quiet nudges of conscience for many years. Life became turbulent, decisions confusing, and inner peace rare. Yet one morning, in a moment of quiet reflection, attention returned. The first gentle whisper of guidance felt profound, even urgent, not because it had changed, but because the heart had returned to listen. From that moment, every choice became clearer, every step steadier, and the presence once taken for granted became unmistakable. This is the promise. Guidance never abandons those who return with humility. The sacred response to openness. The heart that chooses to listen again finds clarity, alignment, and a renewed strength that had been quietly waiting all along. The gentle whispers of the Spirit are always present, waiting for hearts that are willing to notice. This message reminds us that ignoring divine nudges slowly dims our inner clarity, just as neglecting mindfulness weakens amongst discipline. Yet the guidance never truly leaves, it simply waits for our attention. Through stillness, awareness, humility, and disciplined practice, we can reconnect with these subtle signals. Each pause, each moment of reflection, each small act of listening brings clarity, peace, and alignment. The voice of the sacred does not demand, it guides. And when we return with sincerity, we find that guidance flowing once again, steady, clear, and protective. Take a moment each day to pause, breathe, and listen. Honor the small nudges in your heart. Allow them to shape your choices, your intentions, and your path. In doing so, life becomes not just easier to navigate, but deeply meaningful and aligned with purpose. May this wisdom stay with you, helping you cultivate awareness and inner harmony in every step. If this message resonated, please like this video and subscribe to Shaolin Soulfire to continue exploring the teachings of mindfulness, discipline, and spiritual mastery. Let your heart remain open and your spirit calm as you walk your path with clarity and peace.